Cool, we're recording now, so
Hello.
I just got that going. All right, so just briefly introduce yourself, what you've been doing lately, and what your sort of connections are to dariacore and music in general.
Okay. So, I'm xaev,
Mhm.
and with the xaev project, I'm primarily known for like the broadening series, I guess, which is like kind of my own take on the dariacore style, if you want to call it that.
Mm.
And like my connections to music in general, well, I've kind of been inspired by different offshoots of EDM like my whole life, and also a mix of like video game music and stuff. Obviously the Undertale and Deltarune soundtracks.
Mm.
It comes through in Birdly Paw, obviously, since
Yeah.
it's the whole aesthetic is like Deltarune stuff.
Mm.
But yeah, it also has inspired me musically like a lot. And what I've been doing lately is not as much of dariacore stuff, honestly, but I still have a pretty strong connection to like the community and like, different secret alt side projects or whatever, and like
Mm.
just uh other people in the community. Yeah.
Mm. Because we actually have a mutual connection in Elwood, who was the person who referred me to you for this project.
Mhm.
So, first of all,
Yes.
I do have to give Elwood many thanks for the purposes of this, because without their influence, I wouldn't have been able to come through and do all of this in the first place.
Yes, they are
I've
awesome.
Absolutely. No, for sure. A big influence of mine as well. Honestly, really, really strong creative. And I mean, as well, in general with dariacore and hyperflip, genuinely, there's a ton of really interesting sounds and ideas that are going through that I really want to bring light on with this, because I think there's just a lot really to talk about with how
Agree.
the scene has progressed over the last what 3 years or so.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, definitely. There's been many kind of eras or stages to the way the community has changed. From the beginning being a lot more casual, I guess, and just sort of like almost like just a joke between a bunch of producers, and then like now, like I feel like there's kind of a think piece on this sort of style like every other day. There was just like a Pitchfork article or whatever, like about how it has blown up in Japan and stuff, and like it's a bit crazy, honestly. But yeah, definitely fun. Lots of stuff to talk about.
I did actually want to talk about that very briefly before we sort of delve all the way back to the beginning. I'm already guessing you're very familiar with the idea of hyperflip and what's been going on with movements in Japan. But tell me what your impressions are of what's been going on over there, and how you've sort of how you've sort of seen the developments when you compare them to your time with dariacore, and how you've progressed with music as a result of all of that.
I love it so much, like watching what Japan has done, and like it's really interesting the way like I guess a lot of the kind of, I guess if you want to call it, intertextuality of like dariacore, like the references and stuff are very like Western and like very between friends and between like a closed off sort of community. And then for Japan to sort of take influence from that in their own way, and like even not understanding all of like the Western kind of references or memes or whatever, and still like maybe using samples or whatever that are like something that they might not understand fully, and then like just doing their own thing with it. Like it's very interesting. I don't know. I love it a lot. I really, really love how passionate the Japanese like hyperflip community and stuff are about like the music, and just genuinely just creating, like doing lots of new things for fun, and putting their own culture and stuff into very, otherwise I would say pretty like Western internet music sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I think something that came up in a conversation that I had with Elwood about this exact topic was there's a sort of what's the word I'm looking for here? It's like a cultural conversion of sorts, or sort of like a cultural localization actually,
Yeah.
of a lot of the Western aspects of dariacore that we see in hyperflip, but it's not necessarily like a one-to-one conversion in the same
No,
way.
they definitely like put their own spin on it, like entirely. It's totally turned into a different thing on their end. Yeah, it's awesome.
Because I've seen one particular project that was pretty much like a sort of a localization of sorts of the old Leroy work, but for
I know
a sort
exactly
of,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, for a more sort of Japanese sort of contextual framework, as it were. So it's really interesting to see that even though I think there's not a complete bridge of understanding between the history of early dariacore and what's going on in hyperflip right now, there's still sort of an awareness that has bled throughout both scenes that has caused this sort of osmosis to sort of occur, which is very interesting, especially with events like Car Crash and Siren as well, and how that's sort of
yes, I love seeing that stuff so much, like on Twitter, all of the like appreciation of like the scene from them, and like stuff like making posters and things of like all the alternate accounts and stuff like in the scene, even like not knowing that like maybe half of them are like the same people, and just like
yeah,
treating them as all little like different elements to like what make up the genre is just like, I love it a lot. Really adds like, kind of shows how much life has like come out of the scene.
it's like a petri dish almost of little coincidences that make this one big piece.
Yeah, they all just add up to like this big, I mean, pretty much everything you would describe the scene as is just like little moving parts that are adding up to create something big, even like just entirely separate things. And I mean, that's also like reflective of what the music is, even, you know, in sampling from a bunch of places, and like the way that the genre itself is built off like taking different parts of like different people's like friend group cult like inside jokes and things, and like just it all just morphs into like, you know, this one big community, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a very casual kind of gathering that has sort of legitimized itself almost purely through persistence, really. If anything, there's a very clear heart there, even if people sort of refer to it as sort of like a very in-joke, very closed off kind of, I wouldn't, there was a word I was about to say, but I think I probably won't say it because there's certain connotations. But more so, I think the idea that you could create something so big, despite the fact that a lot of it almost often stemmed from one person's sort of random fever pitch idea and just became its own sort of ecosystem in itself. But that actually brings me on to the first question I did want to ask, which is, and I know it's a bit of a curveball considering we've basically jumped through entire periods of history here, but what was your start with dariacore like in terms of how you found it, so your sort of initial thoughts on it, and maybe the potential inspirations that people were drawing upon when you first came across it?
Okay, so honestly, when I first like encountered the scene, it was really my introduction to like the larger underground music ecosystem as a whole, really, and like all the different like, I mean, because a lot of the people like around the time the initial sort of wave of dariacore, I guess, were just like people who had their own main projects, like producing like other kinds of like pop music and stuff like that, and the whole dariacore EDM thing was just like a little side thing, basically. And I just like encountered it randomly off like, I don't know, a friend reposting or something, like just by chance, and then kind of went down the whole rabbit hole of like, oh, like this music is like, you know, so crazy, and there's so many like things that like just so many samples and things that like are nostalgic or whatever, and also like stuff that I have no context of whatsoever. Like I want to dig and I want to find like who's behind what account, and like talk to people and like what is that sample, and like basically just I don't know, I got into the community entirely as like a fan, really, of like the initial wave of music. I mean, I did not really have any connection to people within this scene like in the beginning, whereas like a lot of that initial wave of people were just like a bunch of friends who just all like happened to kind of boost each other's pages and everything. And I mean, yeah, my initial like thoughts and like when making my own stuff and putting it out as well was like that just it seems like there was a pretty small but like also small but quickly developing like ecosystem, like you said, of just people creating lots of really interesting music with their own inspirations from all over the place. And you know, it just felt really welcoming and like um everyone was just open to hearing people's different takes and stuff on like a pretty simple concept of just like sampling and like having fun and like doing whatever.
There were definitely, because from what I've seen with very early dariacore, around the sort of period of the release of the original dariacore Leroy album, is there was a sort of blossoming community that sort of started to grow and expand a lot more as more and more people discovered this sort of novel idea and all of these production methods and whatnot, and sort of shared different elements together to see what worked and what didn't. And
there was like some, you know, like Discord servers made like around like the time Leroy was just starting to gather a little bit of like attention, and that was also helped by the fact that like at the same time Jane behind Leroy was like getting a little bit of like news coverage and stuff from their albums, like their album and EP released under their name. So like dariacore was also being kind of had light shed on it, because it was like, oh, you know, it's crazy because like they are releasing this music onto here, and then this like really experimental out there sample based music like on a secret kind of side project. And I'm sure a lot of people were drawn to that music just by like, I don't know, reading those articles randomly, or like seeing just an interview or something like that, like in media outlets and stuff, music outlets.
Yeah, of course. There were a ton of articles actually, now that you mention it, that were being produced literally at the same time as the Leroy project and Jane's other projects, that I think really sort of helped dariacore blow up to the extent it did, because
it kind of cemented it as like a real thing, I guess, rather than just like this little like joke between friends, I guess. I mean, even though like to the people creating it, that's what it really always was, but like it was being kind of shown in a different light, I guess. It's like, oh, you know, like there's this little scene that is blossoming like in the underground. And I think among the initial wave of people, and probably the latter wave of people as well, it had like both positive and negative side effects, I guess, to like how that affected the music and like just generally the state of the scene, I guess. Like I would say all of that extra attention kind of, I mean, probably affected a lot of how people were creating, and felt maybe that since this has been like a defined thing now by like official outlets, that now like there's a certain more of a solidified like formula to stick to, or like more of like since this is being treated as more like a real genre, now you have to like do things to fit into it, even though like initially when it was just kind of beginning, like people were just doing whatever they thought was fun, and that was the whole appeal of it. So
it's like
definitely definitely both sides of that.
It's I guess to sum up what you were alluding to, there's the genre, not the sound of dariacore rather, was beginning to be standardized as you had all of these outlets and whatnot making coverage on it, and there was this sort of pressure almost to sort of conform to that sound in a way that I think other people who got into dariacore because of how laissez-faire, how freeform it was, oftentimes, you know, didn't want to sort of view that way. There was, I think there was a very clear contrast between what I think people wanted to do with dariacore and what the sort of outside perception of dariacore was, which I think actually brings me to a question I do want to ask, actually. Are there any outside generalizations or misconceptions of dariacore that you maybe want to address or possibly even critique to a degree?
Mm. There's a lot I can say here, so bear with me while I gather my thoughts.
No, no worries. But for the record, actually, if there's anything you don't want me to keep in the recording, just say beforehand. Let me know, and I'll make sure I just cut that out. I'll make sure to remind myself to cut that out when I actually write the video as well. So,
no, thank you, but like, I think it should be fine. I guess I would just say that like I mean, like I was explaining before about like a lot of coverage sort of on the sound or quote unquote genre as it would be put by a lot of internet coverage, whether it be media articles or other YouTube videos, and like just generally people who have maybe had like a first initial impression of the genre, like ecosystem or like just scene or whatever, like would like latch on to certain things that make it quite separate from something they've heard before, like maybe the meme samples or like distorted like synths or like just loud like all over the place sort of sound, and think that that is like the kind of the only thing that separates the music, I guess, like, which I think fundamentally what makes like the style special is really just the sampling and like the fact that it's pretty much anything really. The music is just electronic music in any form with samples pretty much, and like I think there's a lot of ways people have made it really like just a certain thing, and then as a result, then the people later creating music after discovering the genre are then like thinking, oh, I have to like make my drums really loud and distorted, and like it has to be this BPM or tempo or whatever, and like has to have this formula, and like it just kind of diminishes the creativity and also just like comes across a bit closed-minded to like exploring the different sort of offshoots of styles within the scene, I guess. Like there's because dariacore itself as a style takes from many other like pre-existing subgenres and genres and styles and niches, and that's like what makes it special. And so to kind of box it in as its own one thing, like it's fair that people are going to make generalizations about pretty much any kind of music ever and like any niche on the internet, but I think just like I don't know, it has definitely had somewhat of a negative effect on like the creativity, and also just like you're also saying, it kind of creates a pressure to conform to that like sort of standardized formula, So I think just the way people sometimes talk about it is a bit like formulaic and like thinking that every genre can be kind of broken down into just like, oh, you just need this checklist of elements and then bam, you got a dariacore song, when like really it's kind of supposed to be fighting against that formula to begin with, and like saying, no, you can take from here and all of these other things and create something new, and that's kind of what I think makes it actually special.
It's much more than a YouTube tutorial for sure. It's definitely a lot more than what a lot of people suggest it is. But
yeah, for sure. I think it's really just like an exploration of music and like the history of music and underground music and just like the love of music and electronic music more specifically, really. And like I think kind of dumbing it down into just a few boxes that you have to check really is just kind of, I feel like that's a closed-minded way to view music altogether, really. So
would you then say as a result that the outside misconceptions and generalizations of dariacore are more so a case of people's, or rather just a general person's lack of understanding of music? Or would you say there's something particular about dariacore that influences that specific kind of mindset in a way that you don't see with critique of other music genres and or movements?
I think it's kind of both. I mean, I think the fact that the the people, it's almost like the people talking about dariacore and the people making dariacore, there's like really that's like probably such there's such an overlap really of like people who listen to it and like, oh, this is cool and now I want to make it sort of thing, that like it's very like um how to say, people's misconceptions directly like influence then the output of the music as well, sort of thing. Whereas in other genres, maybe it's like more spread out, I guess, or like other like scenes or communities or whatever. There's just more people and it's just more spread out. So it's like it's easier for those sort of um like misconceptions about formula and stuff. It's easier those to kind of spread out, I guess, and not really impact the music as much. But I also do think it is partially, for sure, just about generally people wanting kind of a quick, very simplified explanation of like pretty much anything nowadays. And just like maybe that's a critique of like the shift in internet culture as a whole, but like definitely in music for sure, people can like have a habit of just like wanting a quick 3-step guide on how to make any genre or like what to expect in listening to any genre. And like, yeah, I don't know. Personally, not a fan of that.
Oh no, I completely get you, honestly, because I feel like with the way people also interact with music as a whole, especially with the debates around platforms like Spotify, you've got issues like AI music and also licensing rights, all sorts of things that I think have been a constant in music production for the last 10-15 years, even pre-dariacore. I think
I think it's really just like the way the internet interacts with music as a whole definitely has very much been like has shown itself through such like a niche internet kind of scene of music. I mean, like with what you're saying about Spotify, like playlists like being hyper curated almost like to one specific sound, like it informs then how people create because they want to fit those playlists and like get those, you know, that wider reach from having like being on a playlist that has so many saves or whatever. And it just kind of turns into a loop of just the same sound pretty much, because people, you know, go to this playlist expecting one sound, and then anyone who wants to create, well, they just have to fit right into those very specific checkboxes. And like, you know, it's hard for creativity to come from that really, other than like minuscule changes to the formula, which over time kind of compound, I guess, is one way that those sorts of really curated styles shift. You know, it's just over time they can change.
So looking inward then, with how you then look at dariacore producers and how they then perceive what they think of as a dariacore work, would you say that there's been sort of a particular uptake in resistance to innovation per se? Because I feel like it wouldn't be the case considering how many changes dariacore has been through in the very short period it's been around. But from what you're saying, it sounds like there is sort of a sort of push and pull with regards to new ideas.
Yeah, I think it is like a push and pull. There is somewhat of like a tendency for part of the scene to kind of like really want to like just latch on to making very similar sounding music like on repeat more or less, because they want to fit what they think is just like, this is the dariacore formula, it needs to sound like this sort of thing. And at the same time, you're also correct in saying that it almost makes people want to like pull away from like that preconception more and like kind of challenge even what even is dariacore, and like even making things that like maybe some people would consider as being dariacore and like saying like, no, this is just like, this is something else, this is just EDM, or you know, that sort of thing. I mean, that was definitely a big a big part of a shift in the community as a whole has been like really kind of trying to pin down if dariacore is even like a real quote unquote genre,
Mm,
whatever that even means, like is different to anyone.
mm,
But like it definitely has been like a big like uh, a chunk of people wanting to stick to making the same things over and over again, or just like having their first dariacore impression and then just wanting to like think that they've got the sound down now. I'm just going to keep making this sort of thing, and then other people being like, "Damn, aren't we like a bit tired of this? You know, like can we
mm,
just like kind of expand more, or like do we even have to keep making dariacore? Like, can we just like all as artists like expand a bit more? You know?"
mm.
So definitely there's both sides to it like at the same time. I think that's a big part of like the um dynamic of the community as a whole, really.
Absolutely. There's two really interesting questions actually that you've brought up in that sort of explanation that I think are really good to sort of bridge from with this particular discussion. And I guess the first one we can talk about, or rather the first question I could ask is how would you sort of how would you describe dariacore? What would you say characterizes it? Because there's a discussion around, like you mentioned before, and like what I've seen in a lot of publications, whether it's really a genre or not. But what would you
Mm-hmm.
say if you had to codify some sort of concrete explanation as to what dariacore is? Well, what is it?
Mm. Okay, treading carefully with this one
Of
because,
course, yeah.
as as you said, really, like a lot of people have struggled with this, including like publications and stuff like that. Really unsure
Mm,
of like how to talk about it. Like, is it just like a micro scene? Like, is it just a little community? Is it a micro genre? Is it a
mm,
genre? Is it a subgenre? Is it just EDM? Is it like just a name? Like, is it just albums? Are other people just making like rip-offs of those albums? Is that like the whole scene?
mm,
And really, like, it's kind of, I don't know. It's like it's a bit of all of them at the same time because it kind of really varies from person to person what each thing even is. Like, what is a subgenre versus like like a real genre, or what is a like at what point does a subgenre cross into being like an actual genre of its own sort of thing, or
mm,
what at what point does like a micro genre or whatever turn into a subgenre. Like they're all
mm,
so like dependent on person to person how you just think about music as a whole, really. But I think if I had to give my own personal opinion of it as like someone who listens to it and has made stuff that has been said to be Dariacore, I would say like I would say it's more really just of a community of people who are making stuff that is influenced by a lot of different genres and a lot of different subgenres, and just putting it all sort of under one community label kind of thing, just to
mm,
kind of link us all together as like people who surround each other in the same Discord servers and friend groups, and like just to kind of give some like like a sense of community, I guess. I really feel like that is mostly what it actually is, and how people talk about it, like publications and stuff talking about it. They're really, I feel like personally, like I feel like they are just kind of trying to take something that is very not marketable and make it into something that could be marketable, kind of. I feel like really the need to turn styles of music into just like the labels for things is really just about making music marketable and
mm,
separating different like niches and cultures and stuff into like boxes, more or less. It's like different demographics that they can kind of, oh, you know, you want music that's distorted, loud, has samples, has memes. Okay, Dariacore's got you, sort of thing.
mm,
Whereas you could kind of find maybe a few of those or maybe all of those in other places as well, really.
mm,
And that it's just like kind of everyone is just sort of grouped into dariacore. Like you don't really have a say even if your music is dariacore or not. People kind of decide that for you. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's the thing about genres and subgenres and all of that as a whole is like those are decided by people they because the listeners are like the people who consume the music really.
Right.
And um people self like describing their own genre or whatever they're creating is really just like a necessary means to kind of like be marketable, which is kind of just it needs to fit in somewhere, really. It's just what
Mm.
everyone wants to do. I feel like dariacore is just a place for like people to fit in with similar music taste, really.
Mm. It's more of a movement then than a genre or some kind of, I guess, society, as weird a
Yeah, right.
terminology as that would be.
No, I totally get what you're
Mm.
saying. It's just like really a bunch of people who like want to create in a similar way and they're doing it and people have decided that that's dariacore.
Mm.
So,
There's a
yeah.
clear core idea there, but everyone just has different sort of ways to go around where to go with that idea, as it were. It's like
Hmm.
definitely a neighbor. It's like a neighborhood almost, more so
Yeah.
than like a codified sort of definition, which is honestly really interesting because when I was writing for the purposes of research for this whole project, that's a topic that came up a lot in terms of how do you codify something like dariacore, especially when you mentioned that people do tread on very careful waters with regards to calling
Yeah.
it a genre and whatnot. I've seen the discussions around that. So
Mhm.
it's very interesting to see that dariacore, in many respects, is very much not so different from other musical movements elsewhere in the world and elsewhere on the internet in some other period of time, but
Yeah,
very
for sure, I can
much
imagine.
influenced by, I think, the context of when dariacore was a thing, because of course it
Hmm.
was 2020, 2021. I think many
Yeah,
people can probably figure
definitely
out
just
what was
like,
happening during that period.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's really interesting to hear your take on it, because I mean, I asked the same question to Elwood and I got somewhat of the same answer, but of course then again it's also influenced by the fact that I know Elwood personally, like we've met in person, and then
Mhm.
as well his experiences are going to be infinitely different to yours in many respects. So it's
Yeah, for
quite
sure.
interesting to hear your sort of 2 cents on where you would probably see your ideas on Daria Core. Um, I guess moving back to what we were talking about probably like 10 or so minutes ago. Um, would you say there's any factors that you would perceive as sort of restricting Daria Core? And then to that respect, how do you propose that people within these Daria Core communities or Daria Core producers nowadays sort of break out of that mindset and sort of innovate in ways that haven't really been pursued before?
Mm. So, honestly, I think a thing about people wanting, like, discovering dariacore and being, like, told by a lot of, like, YouTube tutorials and stuff, like, oh, this is a new genre and here's how to make it, sort of thing. They
Mm,
get sort of locked into, like, listening to only dariacore, really. And I think that that is, like, also a big contributing factor to like why the sound is like in some ways has like had periods or parts where people just get really locked on to making the same thing over and over is of
mm,
people just listening to the same thing over and over. I mean, I feel like I would say as an artist like that I cannot create like well if I am not getting good input from elsewhere, basically inspiration. And
mm,
I feel like more people really to make dariacore or any genre really like to really innovate on it, you kind of have to listen to things that aren't that genre really.
mm,
Like I cannot imagine that like I don't know, like a big inspiration for dariacore stuff as a whole. I mean, I cannot imagine that Skrillex, when making Scary Monsters and Nice Guys, was listening to other bro step or whatever. Like, I mean, because
Mm,
a lot of it just didn't exist yet, even.
right.
But, like, he was obviously listening to stuff that was like completely unlike what he ended up like as with the output, you know.
Hmm.
And I feel like the same can be said really about the original dariacore albums. I mean, like a lot of the stuff that like Jane was listening to didn't end up sounding like what came out of Leroy. But
Hmm.
then a lot of people then listening to the dariacore albums will listen to what comes out of Leroy and then just make that over and over
Hmm.
again instead of having like outside inspiration sort of thing. So I feel like that is really the main way that you would want the genre to be pushed forward, or you know, the scene, or whatever you want to call it, really.
Hmm.
To push it forward, I think people need to just take more outside influence and just listen to other stuff and use that as inspiration then for their own music. And whatever comes out of that, like, you know, awesome. It just, as long as people keep creating, it's good.
Hmm. Definitely don't think too within the box, as it were. But
Mm.
also, at the same time, just remember, I think, make sure that, I mean, obviously, this is like a constant thready thing, but also make sure you enjoy the music process too. Because I feel like a lot of
Oh,
people
for
with that
sure.
pressure as well,
Hmm.
with the whole codification of things, I imagine a lot of people will probably find themselves restrained by that kind of limiting factor. And I think that leads
Yeah,
to the
absolutely. Hmm.
homogenization of the sound, as it were. Because
Definitely. I definitely experienced a lot of that while I was working on those Berkeley Core albums. Like, I mean,
mm,
because even though they are presented as albums now, really they're compilations because I was just
mm,
uploading song as I was making it, sort of thing. Like, I would make a song, upload it straight away, move on to the next thing. And, you know, I mean, a lot of my input was also coming from just within the Dorycore scene. And since there wasn't a lot of like innovation going on, I would definitely get really just bored because I'd feel like, damn, I'm just like, to keep continuing this project, I'm just making like the same song over and over again, more or less. And like,
mm,
I would like really to make the tracks that I feel like pushed the sound forward in any meaningful way really just came from listening to complete music completely with outside this sort of closed off scene and just
mm.
make something influenced by that instead. And I feel like that's what breeds, you know, innovation is just inspiration from elsewhere.
Absolutely. I mean, tell me a little bit more about your sort of creative process with the Birdley Core albums, and maybe sort of walk me through how you might think that might have sort of influenced the wider dariacore scene, or maybe even just the people around you. Like, what kind of impact did you notice with the way you were approaching your work and how you continued to improve and sort of work upon that formula that you had established for yourself?
So definitely I would say by just taking influence from a lot of outside, more very standardized genre, like subgenres of EDM
Hmm.
outside the scene completely. Like, let's say complextro and electro house and just like um garage and like all that other music that I had been enjoying like before even kind of discovering the dariacore scene at
Hmm.
all, and just like music I grew up on really, and just thinking like, how can I take like the knowledge that I've gained from like making this kind of music with all like the, I don't know, the different production aspects, the different mixing and sound design and arrangement, all that stuff, and how can I use that then to like kind of make something that I would have wanted to listen to when I was like much younger and enjoying that sort of music, sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I mean, I guess I would say that maybe that has been a positive impact from me on innovating in the scene, is just like other people being more willing to like explore beyond like this sort of closed off little sector of underground music and just like listen to other stuff and try and take a jab at like a different subgenre or whatever
Hmm.
and see how they can use their skill that they've learned from making this very specific sound to then try and make a different very specific sound, I guess, you know, and just
Hmm.
like all of it sort of blending together and influencing project after project, and like just growing your skills by taking from other, like you've gotten very good at this one standardized sound,
Mm.
use it for something else, sort of thing, and it often comes with a good result, I guess.
Hmm. It definitely breeds a lot more creativity and innovation in that respect, because as more people see that there's merits or a sort of willingness to look very far from that sort of framework, more people will often try that sort of thing, and you'll probably find a new trend or something, or a new sort of production style that you've never really seen in prior years. That's definitely something that's happened
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of music.
Mm-hmm.
I do actually want to ask then, going off of that, is what sort of future developments do you see in the dariacore or even the hyperflip sound, if you've sort of been paying attention to what's been going on lately?
Mm. Okay, this is a little bit unrelated, but I just want to touch on this because
Hmm.
you brought it to my attention by mentioning this. So,
Hmm.
about hyperflip and the distinction between dariacore and hyperflip, I think that's like interesting to talk about.
Hmm. Of
So,
course. Hmm.
so I feel like nowadays the way hyperflip is sort of talked about is like kind of more like the Japan side, I guess, of like dariacore and the things that they brought to the table and the
Hmm.
influence that they took out of kind of the dariacore scene and made into more of their own thing. And I think that's totally cool. I really am happy with the way that that term has kind of taken on a new life. But also, I just want to say that hyperflip was like kind of a term made by me during a specific period in like dariacore's development when people were pretty unsure of like whether it made sense to call their own music dariacore, if like
Hmm.
at the core of everything, dariacore was called dariacore because it was using cover arts from the show Daria.
Hmm.
And like it was just kind of like a alternate name I proposed, like taking from the fact that the music like tended to have more loud and distorted and quote unquote hyper elements and flip from people flipping samples, I guess.
Hmm.
And at the time, I'm like, in hindsight, I feel like I made that as kind of someone who had not really drawn a proper conclusion on how I felt about dariacore. And I was kind of someone who was doing my own critique of how people view this music. I was kind of doing that by kind
Hmm.
of boxing it in as a very specific thing in the name even.
Hmm.
And but I'm kind of happy that it has taken on its own life as being like kind of like a distinction line between people like the kind of more Western kind of way of making this sort of sound, I guess,
Hmm.
and like the kind of what Japan has taken from it and brought to the table. I think that's good. But yeah, I mean like originally it was just a term, another term for dariacore. It doesn't actually have any distinction in like characteristics of sound or anything
Hmm.
originally when I proposed it, but I think that it's cool it's taken on its own life really. So
Hmm.
yeah. Um but to go back to your question of I'm so sorry.
No, no,
Remind me
no,
of what
no.
you asked again.
No, it's fine. It's cool. Honestly, it's really good to hear honestly your thoughts on this. What sort of future developments do you see then coming
Uh,
out of the Daria Core esque sound? I guess to sort of give it a sort of distinction.
yeah. So, I mean, I feel like more and more as people have expanded their horizons to kind of branching out to find influence in other like scenes and subgenres and genres. I feel like as more people have branched out to take influence from them,
Hmm.
people less and less have been willing to call their music dariacore really. And I feel
Hmm.
like that's kind of been like a through line in the development of how the music scene has evolved is more and more people are just less willing to like box themselves in with any label, and as a result leading to more creativity in how people like then what they produce because they're not forced to conform to like a specific rule set that people have tied to, the name dariacore, whatever,
Mm.
and are just experimenting with music and just having fun creating and seeing where it takes them based on all of their influences and like whatever they're influenced by at the time or in the past. And I I guess kind of to summarize, I think the development of dariacore really is to just morph into a bunch of people who make whatever they want and don't really call it anything. Honestly, I think it kind of is making way more for the criticism of genres and subgenres, like I guess particularly within electronic music as well, like
Mm.
as a whole, really, like really thinking, do we need to like distinguish between this style and this style if like there can be so much overlap that we hadn't really explored before, like, and just hopefully more people just being willing to explore what they like in music and seeing where it takes them rather than feeling the need to conform to a specific label or anything.
Mm. There's definitely a push I've noticed in recent years, especially around underground electronic music scenes, where there's more a distinction in terms of artist styles, more so than looking specifically at genres, or I
Mm-hmm.
think even in terms of production elements. Actually, there's been an interesting push lately, even on that front. I've noticed there's a lot of people, oftentimes, who will categorize music not by a genre per se, but also
The
maybe
person
also,
who kind of brought that to the table. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. There's been a greater push for that, which I think is quite an interesting um counterpoint to what we were discussing before about codification and sort of generalization of genres, and how media outlets need to have some sort of way to describe things, which is very
Yeah,
interesting.
to sort of box someone in as like part of something greater than them, sort of thing, rather than
Mm,
just like letting them stand on their own. I
mm,
think that, yeah, there's definitely been more of a push towards like just enjoying an artist's work individually, like, just attributing that sound that they're putting out to them and like also exploring, who they are then influenced by rather
mm,
than just stamping a label on it and saying like, oh, they're just making Daric or whatever.
mm.
I think that's definitely, yeah, I definitely encourage that push more and more, sure.
There's definitely a sentiment like that in with rhythm game music as well that I've noticed. So it's
Hmm.
interesting to see that this is a sentiment that's not just sort of held to one sort of subset or group of people. It's interesting to see that it's making waves as a sort of popular train of thought, because as somebody who doesn't produce music but has many friends and connections and links to music production through all the different people I've met in my life, it's really interesting to see it from the outside, because I think there's not really a ton of coverage on how producers and artists themselves view this kind of perspective. It's very much sort of the outside looking in rather than the inside sort of speaking outward. And
Agreed. I feel like that has happened like a lot with this Dariacore kind of scene is like
mm,
it's almost uh like YouTubers and outlets and stuff are so. Oh, I hope you can't hear my brother in the background, by the way,
oh
sorry.
no, no,
But
it's fine, it's fine, don't worry about it.
but I feel like there's been so much of outlets and like people on YouTube or other socials just talking about the music and speaking about what it is rather than any artists really being willing to define themselves as like
Hmm.
Dariacore or like, I like kind of defining the style for other people. Other people have kind of defined what we are
Hmm.
like for us, sort of thing,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, because oftentimes when you see music artists, especially on sites like YouTube talking about their music, it's oftentimes very surface level questioning, or almost times
Mhm.
you see artists almost just sort of, you put them in a chair on like a yellow background and you just sort of let them yap for 5 minutes without really any prompt, you know, the kind of
Agree.
genius kind of
Yeah,
framing. So
for sure.
I
Just
it,
it's basically just like marketing really for the music more than like
mm,
anyone willing to actually like explore like kind of really what the artist thinks about music as a whole, or like
mm.
what the people asking the questions have like taken away from it or whatever, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. As an aside, actually, because I know from Elwood and from following the Japanese underground music scene, I think you did a track for MEGAREX, actually, if I remember correctly. Um,
Actually, on that, at the time of saying this, I mean, I have another song as well, like releasing on a MEGAREX comp, literally tomorrow, I'm pretty sure.
right,
Because
because M3's tomorrow, isn't it? Yeah. mm,
mm, yeah, so that's exciting. But yes,
mm.
that is true. I have massive respect for MEGAREX. I have had massive respect for MEGAREX long before I even like started the xaev project at all, and just
Mm.
like definitely a staple in Japanese like electronic music for sure.
I'm quite curious, actually, as a fellow fan of the sort of doujin music subculture, and there's not to toot my own horn or anything, someone who made a video on J-core. Um,
Actually, I think Elwood sent me another one of your videos, and I did definitely skim through it a bit. I am waiting to find a time where I'm eating and I'm in the right mood to like watch through it fully. But like, I can tell you know your stuff for sure.
you know, hearing that from somebody I'm interviewing for the process of another project fills me with a kind of existential dread that I think I'm not going to be able to sleep over tonight. Oh, I feel like the pressure has been put on me quite heavily already.
Oh, seriously? Oops, sorry, man.
No. It's all good. It's all good. It comes with the territory, I suppose. But
Mhm.
to refocus on what I was about to ask, have your recent experiences with MEGAREX, and I suppose as a whole with the what with I guess whatever wider aspects of the Japanese doujin music community you've interacted with, would you say you've had any particular breakthroughs in sort of how you think about music? And has that influenced your recent music production when you sort of frame it back to thinking about dariacore or just your old
So
works?
So honestly, with like, I mean, also what I've kind of noticed with, I mean, the hyperflip scene as well, because that
Mm,
also extends to like, you know, Japanese electronic music really.
mm,
And I, I guess it's made me really just like kind of want to overthink things less and think less about like, oh, you know, what is this going to get called by people like outside listening to this who don't know anything about me or whatever? Because when I listen to a lot of that sort of music that comes from like the Japanese side of electronic music,
mm,
I don't know anything about like the producers. Like I'm not many degrees of separation from talking to them, but there's just kind of a cultural barrier almost, I feel, that like
mm,
I am not, you know, I'm not interacting within their Discord servers and knowing like all the ins and outs of like who everyone is connected with and sort of thing, like that sort of thing. Whereas in the Western side, I mean, like a lot of the people I listen to, I talk to or have friends that talk to, and like it's all like this underground Western music stuff is all very, really interconnected, and everyone sort of knows each other, and that really, and it also kind of, um, it's a lot easier than to imagine like what someone is gonna say about you when you make something a certain way or whatever.
mm,
But with like again with the hyperflip scene, like they we over here that can talk all we want about like oh like it's bad if you like are making the same thing over and over again. It's but like you should try to innovate more, like whatever. But the fact that they just really kind of don't like care, or like either care or see our kind of outside input as much into their music, it kind of makes them create better because they are just thinking less about like what the external kind of reception is going to be for their music. They're just making to make, and then however it's received is however it's received. And I don't know,
Hmm.
that's really like inspirational to me in just like kind of trying to create based on my own inspiration and stuff, and just not really think too much like, oh, what is this going to be labeled, like who is the audience for this music, etc., etc. I just like it makes me more willing to care less, I guess. So
Hmm.
that's what I really like take um take inspiration from with that sort of music. Yeah.
It's really cool to hear, honestly, because you don't really hear. I mean, recently it's less so the case, but you don't really hear about artists making that kind of cross-cultural connection in much the same way as you sort of would on the mainstream end sorts of things. It's very much like
Mm-hmm.
you make what you know with who you know for the most part, but seeing people
Mm-hmm.
break their boundaries like that I think is really interesting, and that's also something that I think really draws me towards dariacore and hyperflip as two sort of vaguely different communities in terms of thinking that have very sort of similar methodologies when you break it down bit by bit. It's really
Yeah,
interesting to see
agree.
that even though that there's this massive cultural divide between the two, even just based on the kinds of musical influences that surround them, they're actually not
It's not so
quite that
different.
different,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly.
Because that's something I noticed with the J-core video, and with me doing my research on Japanese hardcore. Like, the idea of Japanese hardcore, even as a term, just doesn't make sense, because ultimately it is, effectively speaking, just hardcore music made in Japan for the most part.
Exactly.
It's not like
Hmm.
its own distinct little thing, like Thing versus Thing Japan, and then you do the Wojak.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, honestly. I think I mean, to that degree, then would you say that I think it's would you say that it's better than, with going back to dariacore, then would you say it's better almost if when people make their music they don't even think about what to classify it as and just like make the thing, as it were?
100%. 100%. I mean, I think, yeah, sure, it's definitely helpful to like know where your inspiration is kind of coming from in
Mm.
some respects, like just to, I don't know, help you better like produce more like within the right like kind of produced to fit a context more or something like that. Like, oh, I
Mm.
want to make something that sounds like it came out of like the 2010s or whatever. This is like going to be like a 2010s Skrillex type song or something like that. This is going to give me that same sort of feeling.
Mm.
So just something like that, maybe. Like, just kind of, it's cool to know your inspiration and influence and like, but it's also cool to just like not care really at all. Just like make and like whatever people end up saying about it, like at the end of the day, it's not really your problem. It's kind of
Mm.
everyone else has kind of decided anyway that it's their job to work out what music is, like for the
Mm.
artist. So everyone's just gonna do that, whether they're gonna do that. Everyone's just gonna do that, whether you say what you want about it or not. So at the end of the day, you should just create and create how you want to.
Mm.
And I think that that sort of can create like an uncompromised version of like creating to the fullest sort of thing.
Mm. Absolutely. Who would you say then, if to put you on the spot a little bit, who would you see rather as sort of paving the way for new breakthroughs or sort of new ideas of thinking about dariacore in terms of its sound that you've seen recently? I guess this is
So
like the shout out section.
yes, okay. So definitely like within more the Japanese side, I would say like definitely Yax 03 or like
Mm.
they have like a fair few different projects, but that is probably their most known, like Akimalo and just all their various projects. Just so much passion for like getting to know people within the Western scene. I mean, like they are just a joy to talk to, even despite the fact that there is like a language barrier,
Mm,
and just seem so passionate about the music and wanting to find ways to take inspiration from it, but not just straight up copy paste and do the same thing.
mm.
I love everything Yax makes for sure. Just so cool.
Yax is
Um,
definitely a trailblazer, yeah. Sorry to
mhm.
interrupt.
Um, and also, I would say within like the more Western side of things, I would say like really and realer and just a lot of the more Western artists that have been showing up on like the Lost Frog Productions like net label like within
Mm,
Japan, but they've been taking in like a lot more Western artists like into their compilations and stuff recently,
mm.
and I think definitely, yeah, there is definitely like still innovation in the Western side of things. Like you said about like thing versus thing Japan. I'm not here to say like, oh, Japanese people, they just do everything like so much better than us, but I am a little bit saying that, but you know,
Well,
not
I
to
mean,
that
it's kind of
degree.
unavoidable at this point, like the way we've
Yeah.
sort of gone about it.
But yeah, I mean, really and realer and Yaks, like definitely all people I can see as like actually pushing the sound forward because they have so much influence and inspiration from like outside the scene. Like I know really like came from making like plug-in B beats and like other, also they make a lot of other music as well, just like random trance stuff. And Rilla is definitely a lot more into like sound design and like
Mm,
more dubstep side of stuff. So they take a lot of influence from that sort of like whole dubstep ecosystem of like, you know, that has its own a million subgenre labels you could go into. So yeah, I mean, definitely those three people I can think of off the top of my head.
mm. No, I definitely, I recognize a couple of the people that you've mentioned throughout. So, I mean,
Mhm.
first of all, you know, if you want to look for dariacore or anybody who ends up watching this unedited interview, you know where to look. I'll probably just reminder to me when I edit this, put visuals on the screen and then like Subway Surfers or something. I don't know. I need like something to do while I'm looking at DaVinci Resolve for 6 hours. Um, it's interesting actually with a lot of the names you've mentioned, and also a latent aspect that I've noticed with dariacore is a lot of people in this scene are like very young, like very very
Mm-hmm.
young. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
talking. Some of these people aren't even in university yet, kind of young, which is really
It's funny
interesting to me. Mm,
like when I started like making this stuff, I was still like in high school. I'm done with it now, and
mm,
like I've kind of gotten older within the scene, and now that I've sort of, I guess, quote unquote grown out of it or whatever, there's other people coming along, sort of thing, like, you
mm.
know, in high school and whatever, and they're growing up and making this music, and then kind of deciding where that will eventually lead them, you know.
Hmm. Would you say that dariacore is a sound that's sort of maintained by the young people, or do you think there's going to be a period of time eventually where figures like you and Elwood, for instance, end up like sort of carrying that torch, even though you're much older than you were when you started out?
So to be honest, like I've almost kind of been waiting for like dariacore to like keep making its waves until it sort of starts, I guess, dying off to be able to make stuff again. Really,
Oh,
I'm almost waiting for it to become like, I guess, cool again, and like not cool, but like almost like let it sort of keep running its course and see where it leads, and then
hmm,
eventually like sort of return to it when it's a more novel sort of thing. Because right now it's
hmm,
very self-sustaining sort of thing. It's very much like you said, kind of a loop of like people like me and Elwood like in, and then younger people coming along sort of to fill like, I guess, the shoes sort of thing.
hmm.
So I'm just kind of watching that loop to continue and see if eventually there will come a time where, like you said, maybe Matt and I decide like, hey, we need to start like carrying the dariacore torch again and start like pushing this genre, to its limits. So
it's really interesting, honestly, because I noticed that a lot. That a lot of the people who are like still in this are insanely young. We're talking like people like at least a decade younger than me. That's like 2 presidents at minimum. Like
I know it makes me
separation.
self-conscious sometimes because I'm like, damn, like when I was your age, I was like nowhere near as this good. When you turn my age, you are going to be so much like better than me. I mean, yeah, there's no real better, I guess, but like just self-consciousness. Gosh.
No, absolutely. I mean, like as I'm doing research for these kinds of videos, I mean, I'm feeling that like, damn, I'm sitting here making YouTube videos. Meanwhile, you're out here like getting news articles and stuff written on you. Like, damn, it's a kind of self-reflection that you have to sit on for a minute, and you almost sort of get enveloped in it. But it's interesting that you mention how dariacore has become self-sufficient now, because I remember thinking about this as I was writing the first parts of the script for this video and doing my own research. It seems almost at this point like, as you've probably alluded to, that dariacore is effectively matured as it stands, because you don't see that kind of development with a lot of other sort of music on internet music movements in the same way. I guess if I had to compare it to something like vaporwave, as possibly derogatory as that comparison may be.
Not so much, honestly. Like, I mean, if you really read back into some old articles, I think. Oh my gosh, my prof.
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I think Jane would actually attribute a lot of like inspiration from like of the early dariacore stuff to vaporwave, and just like I mean, they're both sample-based music genres, sort of thing. So yeah.
I mean,
I think that's not the stretch of a comparison, really.
I mean, I actually argued in my J-core video that actually J-core was the first sort of internet-based music genre, as it were, because a lot of the stuff you see in stuff like vaporwave, dariacore, that sort of internet, very cutting-edge internet meme sampling culture, often sort of like stems from a lot of the stuff in J-core, which is quite interesting to think about, the way that I think as music genres, not genres, as music movements begin to mature, you start to see actually there's a bigger pattern there than you thought, which is rather remarkable. I mean, how long do you think, really? I mean, if you had to give a rough estimate, how much longer do you think dariacore, as it stands with the kinds of sounds that are coming out right now, do you think can maintain that sort of self-sufficiency?
So honestly, I think that I'm kind of almost hoping for a time to come again where people really sit down and think like, is this dariacore thing that we've been making, like, is it even real, sort of thing? Like, are we really constrained to this, and like, can we push it more to the point where it almost doesn't need a label or gets a new label, or like, I mean, that's almost kind of what I was trying to do in proposing hyperflip, is like, maybe this can be like a separator in the old dariacore stuff and like now the new scene, everything influenced by it moving forward. That was kind of almost my thinking at the time. And I almost kind of hope for a time where people kind of want that again, of just like, why don't we just like all just make whatever we want and like not think about is it dariacore or whatever, and like maybe that will then impact to how people outside like refer to it or whatever. And then I don't know. So I guess to answer your question, like, I almost hope that it is not too long, but I would say with, I guess, having been in this scene for as long as it has been, like, I mean, it's lasted a lot longer than I expected, considering like when
Mm,
at the time I had arrived, people were already saying like this is a fad, this is like gonna die like in the next few months or whatever, and it didn't.
mm.
It's lasted years, and I mean, I can only predict it like ongoing for more years. But yeah, I would definitely hope that people just kind of reconsider like even needing to label their music as any subgenre or anything at all, and just yeah, just create. Really, that's kind of been the through line with a lot of the things I've talked about. Is I don't think the whole genre discussion even really matters, because at the end of the day, if the music is good, the music is good, and we should all just enjoy it, sort of thing, rather than trying to box it in and define it.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's good that there's still life left in, even with all the discussion and sort of what's the word I'm looking for, the the sort of fear, as it were, that dariacore is on its last legs. It's good to see that there's still some kind of
It's almost like
aspirations.
every time there is like a big kind
Mm,
of shift in the scene of like, oh, like should we keep making this stuff? Should we branch out? It's almost like every time those sort of discussions come up, the scene's life is extended by like another 2 years or something. It feels like that.
because
Like
yeah, you see that
it's
with
like
the Japanese scene. Mm,
the discourse around what dariacore is and all that stuff only fuels people to make it more and innovate more on it. And like honestly, again, if the music is like, if people are continually outputting creative ideas and having fun, like it doesn't really matter what anyone calls anything. So,
mm, absolutely. I guess to sort of finalize this whole discussion, or to sort of wrap it up in a nice little bow and present package, are there any
yeah.
sort of final comments you have regarding Daria Core and the sound as a whole? Is there anything you sort of want to impart upon people who might look towards this for inspiration? Or is there anything you just want to say in general that you feel like you wouldn't have been able to say in any kind of other media outlet that you want to say now?
Mm. Oh yeah, totally. I will say that like on this note, and like with everything I've said about like how dariacore is maybe not a real genre, and like this and that, like like I know that I'm still for the foreseeable for that for the
Hmm.
foreseeable future, I am going to keep receiving DMs in Instagram asking me like, hey, how do I make like a crazy dariacore drop like you? How do I make like your dariacore drums? Like how do you do that? And like for as long as I keep receiving questions like that, like I don't think dariacore will ever die. So no one has to like freak out that like, oh my gosh, like dariacore is over. No one wants to call themselves dariacore anymore. Is the scene dead? I think we are a long way off from that still, because
Hmm.
the internet is, I would say it's true that the internet can grab things and let them go in seconds, and also that the internet never lets go of anything ever. So I think that it is a long time really before this scene like kind of fades out, like for sure.
Hmm.
So that's what I would say. Is just like, you know, everyone keep creating, having fun, and just like enjoy music. Music is awesome.
Well, I mean, you heard it from them. I don't really think there's anything else I can add to that. So, honestly, thank you so much for your time, Xaev. I really appreciate all the insight that you've had to offer towards Dario Core. And honestly, I mean, I appreciate this interview because I feel like I learned a lot, even just in terms of how I think about Dario Core as an outsider that I think I wouldn't have otherwise sort of looked at. So honestly, thank you so much for your time, and thank you honestly for how much you've just had to provide towards the scene and the movement. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Thanks for the opportunity, dude. Like seriously, I definitely respect like the work you were doing, and again the other video you made about like you know, J Core and stuff
mm,
like that. Like just like really diving deep into like the community around the music that is being made, and like actually looking at it as more than just like, you know, a buzzword to like throw on and be like, hey, listen to like the hot new like J Core track or whatever, you know, just like
mm,
it really is nice to like look at music as more than that, and as kind of like a whole culture really of its own, because I think
mm,
that's what makes music special to me really, is that it's
mm.
really just like a reflection of people and culture. And I think yeah, that's what really draws me to music as a whole. So yeah,
Absolutely, yeah.
thanks a lot, dude.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate that I was able to be an outlet or a vehicle for that kind of thought, because I think honestly, with the way people talk about music, and especially how we have sort of modern historical interpretations of music, I feel like the kind of ways that we look at music compared to other mediums of art are increasingly becoming a lot worse in terms of how they're
Yeah.
defined. So I really did want to sort of draw that back in. And I mean, I appreciate that I'm able to have the opportunity to just talk to people face to face about that, because I mean, modern history is pretty much just you have the access to the people as long as they're willing to talk. So it's good that music and history are so deeply intertwined even in the modern day, because the access is really there. You just have to push yourself to go look for it. So I mean, I really appreciate
Absolutely.
you being able to talk about that, and honestly being able to offer your own thoughts, because ultimately, I mean, I do want to allow people to have that kind of reflection, as it were, because it's not something you have a lot of when it comes to music, that I feel that you really see a lot of nowadays. But look, I'm padding out the video time, and I'm probably taking up too much of your time too. Whoa, isn't
No,
it crazy?
it's totally fine, dude. Like, I will say though, just a warning, dude. The pressure's on. So many people are gonna see this video and this scene, and they're all gonna be like, "Ooh, like, how careful did you talk about dariacore? Did you talk about it right?" Like,
Well, I
so,
mean,
no pressure.
I mean,